Network reconnaissance, Traceroute. Traceroute is a fantastic information gathering tool. Now, the concept behind Traceroute is the fact that when data packets travel from the source computer to the destination computer, then there is absolutely no guarantee that each time the data packets travel between the two systems, they will take the same route. In other words, each time data packets travel from the source to the destination computer, the chances are that the data packets will take a different or a unique route between the two systems. So when data packets travel from source to the destination system, then they do not always take the same path. Data packets sent between the two systems may take different paths. Traceroute is a tool that allows you to trace the path between two different systems. Originally, Traceroute was obviously designed for network troubleshooting purposes, but nowadays it's become one of the most efficient, one of the most fantastic and exciting information gathering tools available on the internet. So Traceroute is commonly used for a wide variety of purposes. It is used for OS detection purposes or to identify the OS running on the target computer. It is used for firewall detection. So if there is a filtering mechanism, if there is a firewall or an IDS system running on the target network, it can easily be identified or be determined using the Traceroute tool. Traceroute is also used for network topography information. It is also finally used for geographical information or finding out geographical information on the target computer. In other words, using Traceroute, it is actually possible for you to identify or pinpoint the exact geographical location of the target computer correct to the right continent, country, state, city and ISP. So Traceroute is also fantastic for investigation or tracing of computer criminals on the internet. So what the attacker will now do is, it will actually create a UDP packet and send it to a high port number on the destination computer. Now what will happen is, typically the high port number to which the UDP packet that the attacker has sent to will be closed. As a result, the target computer or the destination computer will actually generate an ICMP port unreachable error message and send it back to the attacker. And this error message confirms that the destination computer has been reached, and at the same time the error message also reveals a lot of important information about the destination computer to the attacker. As a result, that's pretty much how the Traceroute tool works. And not only does the Traceroute tool allow the attacker to gather valuable information about the destination computer, but at the same time, using the Traceroute tool, an attacker is able to gather important network topography information and at the same time gather information about all routers and the path followed from its system to the destination system. As a result, the attacker will also know how the target network has been set up, where it receives its bandwidth from, who the ISP is, and what is the path followed from its system to the target network. So at this point of time, what I like to do is, I like to give a small demonstration on how the Traceroute tool actually works. Like the ping tool, every single operating system, be it a Unix system or a Windows system or even a Mac system, has the Traceroute tool installed by default. So all you got to do is simply go to the MS-DOS prompt, type a few commands, and you should be able to use the Traceroute tool to trace the path of the target computer from your computer. So I like to give a demonstration at this point of time. Now we just saw how the Traceroute tool works. However, personally speaking, I am not too happy with the Traceroute tool that ships on most Windows and Unix systems. As a result, there are a lot of other third-party Traceroute tools that are available off the internet which users can download and start using for Traceroute or information gathering purposes. And what is excellent about these third-party tools is the fact that they are extremely advanced, and the kind of information that they actually reveal about the path, about the target network and the target system is fantastic. So if you really want to seriously gather information about the target network or the target system, I totally recommend that you use any of these third-party tools that are available on the internet. The first tool that I like to recommend to all of you is a tool called Visual Route. Visual Route is basically an online Java application You don't need to download it. All you got to do is start your browser, visit the URL visualroute.visualware.com. A Java application will load on the screen, and using this application you can actually trace the target computer to its exact geographical location on a world map. At this point of time, I like to give a small demonstration of how you can use the Traceroute software to effectively, efficiently trace the path to the target computer. As all of you already saw, Traceroute is a fantastic tracing software. It's extremely exciting. You can zoom in, you can see the geographical map location, you have important personal information or rather host information about the target network or the target system as well. However, my favorite tracing software remains a software called NeoTrace. Now, NeoTrace is again available on the internet for free download. Once you download it and install it on your system, you can actually use it to trace the path to the target network. What is so good about this software is it reveals a lot of extremely sensitive, extremely important information about the target system, which almost none of the other tracing softwares are able to reveal. Not only that, on certain occasions, it is a very Hollywood style. You can actually zoom into certain locations, and the kind of detailed information, detailed geographical information that the NeoTrace software reveals in the output is just out of this world. It also in certain occasions actually reveals the exact latitude and longitude of all systems on path from the attacker's computer to the destination computer. Without wasting any time, I like to directly move on to the demonstration of the NeoTrace software, which will actually prove to you why I like NeoTrace so much. So that's Traceroute and NeoTrace for you. Traceroute and NeoTrace are the two graphical traceroute softwares available to attackers and to users alike. Another extremely interesting variant of the Traceroute tool is actually a software called 3D Traceroute. Now, 3D Traceroute actually traces the path between the source computer, which is your computer or the attacker or the user's computer, and the destination or the target computer on a 3D map. At this point of time, I like to give a demonstration of how the 3D Traceroute tool can be used to trace the path between the two systems on a 3D graph. We just saw and learned how the various traceroute tools can be used to gather a wide variety of different forms of information and types of information about the target computer and the target network. Now, sometimes a lot of people tend to argue that finding out the exact location of the target computer on a world map is not really going to help in computer hacking. I completely agree with that. That's why I have brought up this slide, which actually reveals the various uses, the various kinds of information that Traceroute can actually be used to determine about the target computer. Say for example, using the Traceroute tool and the ping tool that we learned earlier, it is actually possible to determine the operating system running on the target computer. Now, how can you actually use just Traceroute to figure out the operating system running on the target computer? Now, the way this works is, as all of you already know, each time a particular data packet is created by an operating system, the data packet is assigned a default initial TTL value. And the default initial TTL value that is assigned to a data packet actually depends on the operating system running on that particular system that created the data packet. And different operating systems, when they create the same data packet, they actually assign different initial TTL values to it. So say for example, when a Windows NT system creates a data packet, then the initial default TTL value assigned to it will be very much different from the initial TTL value assigned to a data packet created by a Unix system. So what happens is, like I said earlier, when a data packet is created, there is an initial default TTL value assigned to it. And now when the data packet travels on the internet, depending on the number of routers that it travels through, finally once the entire transmission and once the entire travel process has finished, the data packet will have a final TTL value. So there is an initial TTL value which is based on the operating system running on the source computer, and when the data packet reaches the destination computer, it has a final TTL value. Using ping, it is actually possible to find out the final TTL value of a data packet, and using traceroute, it is actually possible to find out the number of routers between the source computer and the destination computer. In other words, this is extremely important to understand not only from the attacker's perspective but even from the perspective of your online exam. If you have the final TTL value using ping, if you know the number of routers between the source computer and the destination computer using traceroute, then if you add the number of routers to the final TTL value, you can actually determine the initial TTL value. And once you know the initial TTL value, you can easily find out what operating system is running on the target computer. Now, if this does not make sense, I like to give a small demonstration which will actually drive home the point of how you can determine the operating system running on the destination computer using traceroute and using ping. And the target computer in this example that I am going to use is my own website, hackingmobilephones.com. So let's see how you can determine the operating system running on hackingmobilephones.com. Now, traceroute can not only be used for operating system detection purposes, it can also be used for firewall detection purposes. In other words, using traceroute, it is actually possible to determine or pinpoint the exact location of a firewall on path to the destination system or right on the destination system as well. So, I like to give a small demonstration or actually show you as to how you can determine the position or determine the location or identify the location of a firewall on path to the destination computer. Now, other than OS detection and firewall detection, traceroute can also be used for network topography information and to gather the exact geographical location of the target computer. Although we have already seen enough examples of how to find out the network topography information and the geographical location, I like to end this session by giving one last demonstration of how you can find out this information using traceroute. And the software that I am going to use is NeoTrace, which has pretty much become our favorite software by now. So, what are the various detection and countermeasures possible against traceroute? Now that you already know how the traceroute software works, essentially it is extremely important to separate or compartmentalize the various concepts which make traceroute actually work. The first concept, like all of you already know, is the ICMP time exceeded error message. The second concept that all of you already know is ICMP port unreachable error message, and third concept is the UDP packet which is sent to a high port number. So, if you are a system administrator and if you want to ensure that the traceroute command does not work, you need to look for these three things. You can either use manual monitoring or you can use an automatic tool which either looks for a UDP packet being sent to a high UDP port number, or you can look for outgoing ICMP port unreachable error messages, or you can look for outgoing ICMP time exceeded error messages. If you find or identify or detect any of these three phenomena happening on your network or on your system, then essentially it means that maybe a traceroute is being performed by the target computer and you might want to disable the responses which are being sent. For example, you might want to disable the outgoing ICMP time exceeded or the outgoing ICMP port unreachable error messages, or you might want to block the incoming UDP packet sent to a high UDP port number. So, if you do that, then essentially you have successfully managed to prevent the attacker from conducting or carrying out a traceroute attack or traceroute probe on your computer. Both manual and automatic monitoring of sniffing can actually take place as far as detection and countering the traceroute attack is concerned. Another thing that can be done is you can use simple access control lists or firewall rules which will actually block the traceroute or prevent the traceroute probe from taking place. And the simple access control list that I like to recommend to all of you is access.list 101 deny IP any 110 exclamation followed by TTL dash exceeded. Now, what this particular access control list does is it actually makes your system ignore all packets with the TTL value as 0 or 1. And as all of you already know, if such a countermeasure is actually implemented, then traceroute will not work, because traceroute requires the sending of TTL packets with final TTL value of 0 or 1, because of which a response is sent back. However, if you block such incoming TTL data packets, then you essentially have prevented TTL from actually working successfully. Another good access control list that I like to recommend to all of you is access-list followed by 101 followed by deny ICMP any 110. What this basically does is it actually prevents your system from sending the ICMP time exceeded error message. And if an ICMP time exceed error message is not sent by a system, then it again sort of paralyzes the traceroute tool which might have been used by the target attacker.